Has science buried God? This is a question that Professor John Lennox has asked in his bestseller, God's Undertaker. Has science buried God? Professor Lennox, who is a professor of mathematics at the prestigious Oxford University, has in a big way influenced my thinking in apologetics, and as such this reflection carries some of his thoughts. Last week, when the president called for national prayers in regard to the deadly coronavirus, some naysayers castigated the move. They argued that in these terrible times, we don't need God but science. The president rightly responded that even science needs God. Now, I have 5 points that prove that science cannot in any way supersede God. The first point is simple but elaborate. If you talk about science, you cannot help but talk about scientists as well. There is no science without scientists. Scientists are human beings, and as such, they have limitations. Science has immense intellectual variety in our sophisticated world, but as long as there are seemingly impossible occurrences, such as COVID-19, that supplies us with all our technological and scientific advancements, science cannot reign supreme. It shows that science is limited in a very, very big way. Number two, related to number one, science is not all we need in dealing with issues with a scientific solution. In other words, even with scientific solutions, sometimes tragedies persist. A good example is, why do people die of curable diseases even when they have been given the best Medicare there is in the world? Malaria, for instance, is curable, but continues to kill millions in the world. Think about it. Number three, the antagonism between science and religion is being propagated by atheists and agnostics, who argue that all we need in this predicament is science. In other words, science leaves no room for God. This is the main reason why many people comparatively argue that science is more rational than faith. This is not correct. Science is not an enemy of God, and God is not an enemy of science. God and science are not alternatives to each other. It is not a question of either or. That is why atheism is not a necessary prerequisite for doing science. There are many top-notch scientists who are and are Christians. For instance, some of the great pioneers of science, like the great English mathematician and physicist Sir Isaac Newton, the great Italian astronomer and physicist Galileo Galilei, the great French mathematician and philosopher René Descartes, the father of analytical algebra. All these scientists were Christians. So that means that the clash is not between God and science, but theism versus atheism. That means it is not a clash between science and another opinion in science, but a clash in worldview. Number four, science does not satisfy the deepest questions of humanity, like the big questions of existence. Why we are here, where we are going, what is the point of living? These are certainly questions which do not admit a scientific answer, and this is a huge limitation on the side of science. Science should indeed be praised for its ability to give clear, reliable answers to some important questions through scientific evidence, but this is only true exclusively within the domain of science. The British biologist and Nobel Prize winner Sir Peter Mendawa, who for his scientific works is regarded as the father of transplantation, acknowledges that science is limited because beyond its scope, it may not give us answers to important questions like transcendent questions. A good example is, it is very difficult to get a base of morality in science. There are moral foundations for doing science, but there is no scientific foundation for morality. You cannot reduce ethics to a scientific formula. This means that for you to be kind to your neighbor, you don't need any scientific formula or scientific law that was invented by scientists so and so. Top-notch Nobel Prize-winning scientists like Richard Feynman and Albert Einstein argued that ethical values live outside the scientific realm, and science cannot form the base of morality, respectively. Number 5. Some atheist scientists, like the great physicist Stephen Hawking, have argued that the universe created itself from nothing, and they use scientific laws to explain the existence of the universe. The truth is, a law of nature depends on the pre-existence of that nature it is proposed to describe for its own existence. For example, Sir Isaac Newton formulated laws of motion derived from the behavior of bodies in motion under certain conditions. The laws describe regularities and patterns to which motion conformed under certain conditions. However, it is very important for us to note that it is God and not Newton who created those regularities and patterns. Friends, in these trying times, let us know that science has its own praise, but it cannot take the praise of God. Even science needs God. The Reverend Dr. Alistair McGrath, a professor of religion and science at the Oxford University and holds 3 doctorates from the same university, argues that believing God is not irrational, but possesses its own distinct and robust rationality. It represents a superb way of making sense of things. And this is why we need to continue to pray that scientists in the whole world will sooner than later come up with a vaccine that will save us from this tragedy. And as we do that, may God help us know we are limited and we need His power, because He is not limited. Amen.